we've had a great discussion over the last couple of days, and as Kevin mentioned this morning, it's only valuable if there's something that comes out of it that's actionable. So what we want to do over the next few minutes is bring up each of the co-chairs, and they each have 4 minutes, and there's a timer down here, and we're going to be fairly strict with that. And the idea is just to give an idea on what the key action items and recommendations that come out of each of their streams. So no further ado, we're going to bring up the Creating STEAM co-chairs, Kevin Newman and Tim Jackson.
I've got 3 points we're going to summarize or to throw forward, and I will say it's difficult because a lot of the things we talked about are around how do you deal with changing business models and the like. So I recognize for those of you that were in the room, we sort of left some big questions out there, but Kevin and I have tried to come up with 3 tangible things that we think could start to get us on the path of solving some of the problems. So something that makes it easier to access and easier to find out what government programs are available and would allow facilitation between levels of government so that provincial and federal government could both come together with one portal to facilitate access for folks that need help. The second speaks to the whole issue of new business models and how do we help monetize. And we tried to come up with something tangible that we could say, what specifically could we point to? And that is, we've settled on a revision of copyright laws to allow people to choose what they want to charge and what they want to charge for. And recognition that today's copyright laws are simply out of date and need to be brought up to a digital age. And the third is the concept of a risk fund. Something to fund risky ideas, recognizing we have an emerging market, and something that would allow for artistic experimentation. And something that would specifically acknowledge that the only way we will innovate and that we will change is by acknowledging failure and accepting failure. And so recognizing that a fund like this, everything that it funds is not going to necessarily work, but the only way we will absolutely allow people to innovate and allow for this artistic experimentation is to provide some level of funding to try new ideas. So those are the 3 things that we've come up with from our stream.
So next we'll bring up the Learning Stream co-chairs, Sarah Diamond and Ken Coates.
Hi everybody, what an exciting last 2 days we've had together. So we have 3 recommendations. We felt passionately that we really need to coordinate literacy on the federal and provincial scale. And we need to have a strategy that puts together a national provincial plan across curriculum from K to 12, right through post-secondary education. Component of that will be an open source repository of all the great things that are happening in Canada in digital learning. We've got incredible resources. We need to make those available to Canadians at the federal level. Our second recommendation is to create a national repository of co-op programs, a facilitator of co-op placements and internships for all of our brilliant students and recent graduates to make sure that we link them into business and really help to accelerate their skills development and their relevance. And finally, Canada for 50 years has had some of the best interdisciplinary and collaborative research in the digital media space in the world. We need to have programs to facilitate funding that are streamlined. We love this idea of the concierge. We want a research concierge, we want a commercialization concierge that helps our researchers and our companies continue to be competitive and successful in great digital research and really successful commercialization of that research.
Next, please welcome up the Changing Stream co-chairs, Gary Mavera.
In the Changing Stream, as someone said earlier, there was a lot of concepts thrown on the table, and I wouldn't say there was necessarily agreement on all of them, but some of the themes that came out, we need to increase our understanding of what's going on. We need some form of research institutes. Number 2, the recognition that we are competing against the world in all media, and we need to adopt a sense of urgency with respect to what we do with that new competition. 3, we need to examine our regulatory structures and do something, even if it's not perfect and we don't all necessarily agree. 4, the future is non-linear and it crosses borders, so we must have a commercial and technical infrastructure to build strong companies, and the message there is scale matters. The 5th is the technology is really only as good as the people who are using it, And training and retention of talent is crucial. And 6, we need to be more strategic with our Canadian content policy, and this needs to focus on what Canadian consumers are doing. And the last point is we need to get a conversation going across institutions, across businesses, and across countries to facilitate open and cost-effective rights management and transactions. Thank you.
Next up, we have the Empowering Stream co-chairs, Rene Barcelo and Chris Labrador.
In the Empowering Stream, we discussed many different areas, but the 3 points that we came up with were in the context of networks and the revolution, that the private industry may not be able to do this on its own. And we believe that the Canadian next generation network infrastructure could be approached as a public utility. So in a sense, looking at our next generation of infrastructure, much like we would look at roads, and the destinations that they connect and the vehicles that we use to get to those destinations would all be opportunities for new endeavor and new revenue generation. Another point was that we believe that Wi-Fi networks need to be widely accessible, much like basic cable services. Although we can't do what Singapore did and declare as a country that they have 100% or we have 100% Wi-Fi coverage, it certainly doesn't underestimate the fact that they made it available to a majority of people in large metropolitan areas. And for anybody that's used Wi-Fi in a place like Singapore can appreciate the fact that it's there and it's accessible regardless of your location in the city. So the last point that we have is that we believe that technologies that would be used to provide those empowering characteristics that people are looking for and that they would use, they're here today. It's not 5th generation or 6th generation or some other generation of wireless or network technologies that's going to make things change. The technologies are basically here. What we need to do is provide the focus and motivation to enable it. And when I say we, I mean everybody in this room. Each one of us needs to provide a focus, and each one of us needs to create an environment where the work can be started or the work can be continued to see what we can do with the technologies that are available.
Finally, the Revolutionizing Stream co-chairs Jeff Nesbitt and Laurie Rogers.
Thanks, Kevin. Revolutionizing healthcare, digital economy, digital media. Fascinating discussion over the last 2 days. We came up with 3 specific items. Digitize the Canadian healthcare system by 2017, allowing patients to manage their own healthcare and wellness, practitioners enabled through digital tools, and finally, on that first item, processes that are automated to increase productivity and reduce risk around errors. The second topic, by 2017, governments at all levels in Canada, show leadership on harmonizing standards and care practices in our healthcare IT system so we can take advantage of new innovations such as cloud computing and mobile technologies. And finally, as Canadians, we spend $182 billion a year on healthcare. $182 billion. This June, the Ministers of Innovation are all meeting in Toronto, and we have a call to action for them. We want them to commit to developing in the next year, so by May 2011, an innovation strategy that sees us leverage that $182 billion spend in healthcare for competitive advantage. And that are our 3 recommendations.